I never expected a new hire to try and bury me. I expected bugs in code, broken build pipelines, late night pull requests. I did not expect the slow, sticky smear of lies. I'd been at the company 5 years. I knew the architecture of the code base like the back of my hand, and I knew the rhythms of the team, who liked a short Slack message, who preferred a quick call, who took their coffee black. I was 32, one of the top performers, the kind of person managers pointed to when they wanted a safe pair of hands. I liked helping new people. That's how you keep the ship steady. You steer, and you teach others to steer too. Then Lisa arrived. She looked like a sunrise in a startup. Loud blouse, louder energy, a LinkedIn headline that read like a manifesto. On her first day, she breezed in and took a seat like she'd always belonged there. I introduced myself and offered to show her the codebase roadmap. She smiled, a quick, practice thing, and thanked me in a way that felt like a handshake with teeth. The first few days were fine. She shadowed, asked questions, pecked at issues. But the tone shifted faster than a midnight deployment. In meetings, she began to interrupt with the kind of polished sarcasm that looks like humor until it's aimed at you. She would tilt her head and repeat my idea as if she were clarifying, then add a twist that made the original suggestion sound naive. A single edit of the wording, like a footnote that rewrote the paragraph. At first, I let it slide. Meetings are messy. People are nervous. Maybe she was trying to impress. But whispering started to spread, not the casual kind, but precise, hand-rolled rumors. She's not a team player, someone would say, like a coin dropped into a fountain. She's withholding information. The phrases were small booby traps that made managers' ears perk. I noticed the whispering because it landed in odd places. A manager would ask, in passing, whether I'd shared a piece of documentation. A new contractor would assume I'd declined collaboration. Emails started to arrive that hinted at missing context, and each one undermined me a little more. I would open them and feel a small, hot prickle. The smear was deliberate. It had cadence. It was not random. Then came the accusation that nearly buckled my knees. Lisa told my manager, in private, that I had sabotaged her branch, that I'd rerouted a pull request so her feature would fail CI. It was specific and vicious enough to look credible to someone watching the build fail. I remember sitting at my desk and feeling like the air had been pulled from the room. You could hear the code humming and the fluorescent lights in some terrible, clinical sync. I did not sabotage her branch. I would never touch someone else's PR that way. But when an accusation lands, the default impulse of leadership is to ask for facts. That's where I had to become a detective. Documentation is a lifesaver. I began to inventory everything: messages, timestamps, who had reviewed what, the branch logs, the CI records. I wrote down every conversation I remembered, with as much precision as my memory permitted. I screenshot emails where I had shared specs. I archived Slack threads. I made myself a timeline. It took hours when I'd normally have been resolving tickets. At night, my brain replayed meetings with the light of an interrogation lamp. There were other small weapons Lisa used that made her dangerous. Social charm, for one. She knew how to turn a joke into a prophecy. She leaned on managers' ego, the way some people lean on a good vintage. Her whispers were calibrated for impact. Say just enough that a manager questions you, not so much that they owe you an investigation. I told my manager what I had, calmly, with the timeline and screenshots. I offered to walk them through the build logs. She listened in that balanced way managers learn. Not too surprised, not too defensive. She said she'd get HR involved and keep it confidential while they looked into it. The word confidential felt like a warm blanket at first. Then the grinding began. Lisa kept escalating. She started, forgetting, to attend stand-ups where she was meant to sync with me. At the retro, she'd add a passive line about communication gaps, leaving a soft, poisoned echo. People who didn't know the underlying truth took her line to mean there was tension. Tension breeds opinions, and opinions are the currency of rumor. On one afternoon, a seemingly small incident turned into the pivot point. A deployment failed. In the logs, there was a flaky test that had never flaked before. Lisa's feature had been merged that morning. I watched the error stack scroll and knew something in my chest, not a guilty knowing, but a tight fear that the narrative was aligning against me. Someone pointed toward her branch. Her eyes widened in the exact way rehearsed actors widen eyes. Grief, surprise, the perfect victim. When accusations land theatrically, people notice. HR began interviews. They sit you down in a little conference room and ask gentle questions, the tone that precedes a scalpel. I told the truth, with the archive I'd built. Timestamps, reviewers, known flaky tests, log outputs. I walked them through the PR history like a docent. It felt strange to audition my own honesty. HR dug. They asked for raw logs, for who had pushed what, for machine access records. They pulled Slack conversations. They asked engineers to explain processes. The company runs on artifacts. The thing that makes modern accusations survivable is that most of the time you can prove where the commits came from. I won't pretend it was quick. There were hours where my stomach sank when a new message arrived. There were colleagues who avoided eye contact, not from guilt, but because they didn't want to be the person who took a side too early. Meanwhile, Lisa continued her campaign, doing the small, corrosive work of suggestion and insinuation. She complained about not getting help and posted passive Slack messages about gatekeeping and toxic silos. When someone searched the channel for help, her messages would be the first ones to appear, framed as a cry for openness. Then the break came. IT had a flag in the logs. One of Lisa's claims relied on a screenshot that, when traced, had been taken from a Slack thread that did not exist at the time she said she'd referenced it. HR found a chain of edits on a shared doc that indicated someone had altered timestamps to make a late-night note appear earlier. They found a pattern, edits that conveniently showed me as unhelpful, deleted messages that tracked my supposed silence, and a series of private DMs where Lisa actively encouraged colleagues to believe the narrative that I was hoarding knowledge. HR brought us both in. The room felt smaller than it should have. Lisa sat across from me, smiling like someone whose favorite story was in the middle act. I kept my face still. HR read the findings, altered timestamps, missing logs, a dug-up pattern of nudging others to doubt me. The evidence was not theatrical. It was machine precise. You can mislead people with charm for a while, but code loves to tell the truth. Lisa's face changed when the timeline was played back. Her smile thinned to a tight, brittle thing. HR asked her to explain. She stammered, tried to reframe, and then, crucially, she blurted a line that echoed around the room. I wanted to stand out. I thought if I made the lead scared, leadership would notice me. It was a childish confession, but it exposed the motive. Vanity dressed as strategy. HR did what they must. They issued a formal warning, placed Lisa on a performance improvement plan, and required coaching and mediation. For some people, that reads like a slap on paper. For me, it was a necessary containment. In an environment where reputation is everything, unchecked manipulation can wreck careers. I wanted harsher consequences. I admit that, but the company's policies are designed to escalate, to be fair, and to give people a way back if they can show change. The aftermath was quieter than the accusation. The team breathed out slowly. Some colleagues slipped back into normal conversation as though a gust of bad weather had passed. Others were more cautious. Trust had a new, thin membrane. I found my inbox calmer. Fewer passive statements floated into channels, and the tests stopped flaking in suspicious ways. But the coal smoke mark of betrayal stayed with me. The lonely part was not the vindication. The lonely part was the energy it cost. Hours of defensive work I could have spent shipping features. The nights I lay awake rehearsing what I'd say in meetings. The subtle alteration in how I trusted new faces. It made me jaded in ways that felt unfair. I had always believed in giving people a chance. Now I kept a ledger. There's a softer edge to the story that's worth sharing. In the weeks after the dust settled, two things happened that made me think differently. First, a junior engineer who had been quiet during the mess came to me and said, "I saw how you handled it, and it taught me to document my work better." She showed me a notebook she'd started keeping, a simple log of commits and meetings. She said she'd always feared looking paranoid, but she realized clear records aren't paranoia, they're protection. Second, one of the managers, someone who'd been shaky at first, pulled me aside and said, "We need better onboarding for temperament, not just technical fits. He admitted he'd been dazzled by Lisa's spark and had failed to ask the right questions. He formed a small panel to redesign the interview process to include problem solving under pressure and a behavioral segment focused on team stewardship. That mattered. Systems protect you when people don't. I learned, painfully, that brilliance isn't the only characteristic that matters at work. Curiosity, humility, and capacity for steady collaboration should rank higher on the rubric than flash. I also learned how to armor myself in a way that doesn't harden me into someone brittle. Keep records, ask for transparency, and ask for support when a rumor begins. Don't wait for the fire. There was sadness too. I watched Lisa's expression over the next few weeks, humbled, sometimes sullen, sometimes defensive. A person who chooses sabotage is probably someone with trouble in other rooms of their life, insecurity, and upbringing with applause for the wrong reasons, past workplaces that rewarded showmanship over craft. I felt no triumphant joy in seeing her given an improvement plan. I felt sorrow, because somewhere along the line she had learned that human connection is a zero-sum game and that stepping on others would elevate her. A year later, Lisa was still with the company, quieter, attending mediation, her calendar full of coaching. Whether she would reshape herself into a team player or remain someone who wanted the spotlight at any cost, I don't know. People change when they are given both boundaries and a chance. HR's plan gave both. As for me, I kept shipping. I kept mentoring the new hires who actually wanted to learn. I kept my documentation practice and encouraged others to keep their own ledgers. I started asking more direct questions during interviews. How do you handle being wrong in public? Tell me about a time you helped someone you disagreed with. Those questions matter. They didn't make hiring foolproof, but they made it better. The whole episode left a scar and a lesson. It taught me to be suspicious without becoming cynical, to defend my work without becoming defensive in spirit. It taught me that companies can and should build processes that allow the truth, machine logs, timestamps, transparent docs, to surface quickly so human pain doesn't have to be raw for long. Most of all, it taught me that standing in the light of truth is lonely but survivable. You can be smeared and still be true. You can be targeted and still do your work. And, if you're lucky, that endurance becomes the quiet lesson someone else needs to see.